Welcome back everybody to Property Couple. My name is AK.
I'm Lia, and this is our channel where we document property investing, business and working together as a couple.
So it's been quite a few months now since we last updated you, but there's been a reason for that. We've been waiting for such a long time for planning permission on our latest project, which is a former care home that we are turning into quite a large HMO.
If you haven't already seen the walk around video of the former care home, then you can click on the link in the cards to watch that before watching this video or after, whatever works. But we wanted to share a conversation today with our architect Colin, who's going to talk you guys through, as well as us through, about all the delays we had, the reasons for it, the back and forth between us and the environmental agency, and all of the obstacles we've had to face to get to this point. So it must have been December that we got the planning permission through.
Just before Christmas.
So that was an amazing feeling, because obviously we didn't really want it running into 2023 since we bought it kind of middle of 2022. So we have had this property for quite a long time now, and that's costly in itself. So without further ado, this is our conversation with Colin, our architect. It's so good to have you on our channel, because obviously you've been such a key part of our team for quite a few months now, and it's just nice to let you into the channel and also speak to people a bit about this first project we're doing together. So let's call it the care home.
Let's call it the care home, yeah. And let's call you the wizard.
That's very nice of you. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about the initial idea we had for the care home, if you can remember all the way back then.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like care homes now, the industry is very different. So they're becoming more available, and they're almost like ready-made HMOs. So whenever I view care homes, there's always the opportunity to be able to convert them into a HMO much more easier than it is to, say, go to flats or, you know, some kind of masonette or anything like that. So it lends itself to it. And if you think about what a care home actually is, it is actually separate rooms with separate facilities. But the key about HMOs is getting or acquiring assets that has a potential to convert without being refused by the council. You need to be mindful of that, because if you have a property that the council don't want as a HMO, and remember HMOs come with a stigma, that's a big thing for councils, right? Because they don't want lots of objections, they don't want lots of people clambering onto them, which I've seen before. But this property was really exciting because we was in an area where there was a demand, it had all the potential. Starting from the beginning, I don't know if you remember, we did a pre-application to get the guidance from the council as to their view. Now, the key for a pre-application is give the council as much information as you can to then gauge their thoughts before you submit a full planning application. And what it does is, if you get the confidence behind the council on your pre-app, getting approval is actually easier when you go to the full application.
So with our pre-application, if I remember rightly, it all looked pretty good, and we were flying through that, and it was actually all looking really positive that we'd get the full planning through in kind of, like you say, the 8 weeks.
Yeah.
So then what was the first obstacle that stopped us moving quickly when we submitted our full plans?
So when we submitted the application, depending on where you are in the country, you may have to provide a flood risk assessment. All right. And that will determine, you know, in terms of the property and where you are, what risk factors you've got. When you go to a full application, they will consult with the Environment Agency, and they can be very strict. So the first obstacle really was the flood risk. That area, it's near the coast. So they've implemented new flood measures in this area. They've implemented a lot to try and protect the local towns from any kind of flooding, and they've succeeded quite well. But the planners are not as strict as the Environment Agency. So the first hurdle really was overcoming an objection from the Environment Agency, in that they didn't want living accommodation on the ground floor at a certain level, which meant that we had to raise the level. So that was the first issue that we had to come across and overcome through design.
Why was it that we were unable to prove that with having bedrooms already existing on the ground floor of what was a care home, why was it so hard for these people to accept that these bedrooms were going to continue being bedrooms in our proposed HMO?
So the care property, the care class use is very different to what we call a sui generis use. So we're actually converting the property from a care home use into a sui generis being a larger HMO. Therefore, that change of use means that they can apply their policy for new homes. Because you're changing the use, they have the right to apply their policy for new and converted buildings. And that's why we had to overcome that issue.
It's a crazy thing to think, because obviously when you're looking at the street, you can see that there's definitely other homes that have got bedrooms downstairs and our care homes. So for us on the sort of receiving end of it, we were hearing obviously from you guys that we had to raise the ground levels, which would mean like quite an extensive refurb. So can you tell us a little bit more about what we've had to do here with raising the levels and changing the plans to suit the environmental agency?
So to overcome that main obstacle, we had to raise the floor level above their threshold for flood zone 1. Once we get to that level, then we're in living accommodation territory, whereby they would remove their objection. So we have a ground floor plan on the property, which consists of a number of different rooms where you've got, at the moment, as a care home, you've got living room, kitchen, dining room, couple of bedrooms, some laundry facilities and all of that. Having raised the floors in them areas, it does come with a number of extra factors. You mentioned some there, which would be, say, the electrics and things like that. But raising the floor meant that we could sit above the flood risk zone, and therefore the EA would then and did remove their objection.
Right. It's crazy to think that these flood risks exist in an area that has never flooded. What are your thoughts? Obviously, for us, we're obviously Googling, floods in this postcode history of the UK, and I don't think we ever found a flood in this flood zone A area. So what's your take on this? Do you think we could flood as a? To
be perfectly honest, right? It's I've had arguments with the Environment Agency before on other applications, and the way they assess it, this is done by a computer program that could assess the risk of a 1 in 1,000 year event, right? So this area may not flood in the next 1,000 years. So we are implementing this protection for an event that may happen in the next 1,000 years, right? So the likelihood of it flooding, very, very low. But in their view, the fact that you have a risk in 1 in 1,000 year, you need to protect against that. So I don't think for the period that you own this property and run this property, it will never flood.
I think what's interesting as well, Cole, is if we can pull up the plans to show, the viewers the profile design of the building that you've put in, it's actually very high, isn't it? Those rooms at the back of the property are extremely high.
Yeah, it's above ground level by about 580 millimeters already. Once you're above the flood risk, in the eyes of the council, you are in a safe zone, right? So if you're sitting at the first floor in the property, you're safe. Doesn't matter how much it floods, you are safe. And how long does it take you to walk up 3 or 4 steps to be safe? Doesn't take that long, right? And it's got to be a big flood to get to this property. It's quite inland. So yeah, there's all these kind of arguments to say, but unfortunately with the EA, you have to abide by what they say. It's just one of those situations.
Yeah.
So we've done that. We are super safe. We're pretty confident that this property is definitely not going to flood, in the time we're going to have it, and we're probably going to, help others in 1,000 years' time.
Make sure it never floods.
Yeah, so it's going to be
right. Yeah. You protected it for 1,000 years. Just remember that.
So how can you just maybe explain to the viewers how we had to then adapt the plan slightly in accordance with this? Because at the beginning, we were sort of trying to, we were moaning but really what it comes down to is, right, what is the solution here? And you're the man with the solution. So yeah,
the simple solution is you have to raise the floor level. It's the only way to overcome and come outside of the flood risk zone. So we raised the floor. So as you come in through the entrance door, you'll find that there's 4 or 5 steps that leads up to the platform. That platform is then your new ground floor level for the front area only, and that will house what is the bedroom and a kitchen diner. So we've got beautiful high ceilings in the property, and unfortunately we can't retain that height because we're raising the floor. So we're going to a more standard height, which is not uncomfortable at all. It actually is standard what we used to in our normal homes, but where you had 3.2 meter high ceilings, it's not going to be quite as nice as that now. But we've got space to do it, so we can raise the floor level, we can bring it up to a certain flood risk zone so that we can get rid of the EA's objection, and the front area of the building simply gets raised. But that does result in raising the doors, raising the electrics and things like that, and protective glazing. So there's a few things that you've got to then add in, which we hadn't had to allow for before until the EA got involved. But they can be overcome as well.
I think originally at the beginning we were going for was it a 10 or 11 bed, and now we're looking at more of a 9 bed. Is that right?
Yeah,
so
that's right. Yeah, so we got 1 bedroom on the ground floor remaining, but we actually had 2 or 3 bedrooms from memory on the ground floor, and we had to remove them because of this flood risk zone. But then we looked at how can we make the best of the plan to not lose too much of the potential income by adding a room in the roof, and therefore we ended up with 9 rooms. But actually rejigging the plan, we've got 9 rooms with en suites.
And actually, I think, Colin, you've tweaked the plans further to allow for, you know, the 2 smaller rooms in the middle to have their own.
Yeah, that's right. You know, I mean, actually, I was talking with Darren, you know, who you guys are working with as well, and we were looking at the plan, and yeah, there was sufficient space to be able to make them all en suite. You've still got your separate WC, which you need on the ground floor. That's existing, which is great. So you haven't got to do anything there really. But being all en suite is ideal. And yeah, you know, I think if I was to rent a room, I'd want an en suite too.
Yeah. Not forgetting as well how actually convenient it is that we've got a drying room as well now, because in HMOs, obviously people use the washing machines and they don't always use a tumble dryer, especially in the UK, we don't all use tumble dryers. So like hanging out your laundry in its own dedicated room and not your bedroom is actually quite a nice thing, I feel.
Yeah.
And it could be secure. Yeah, it could be secure as well, you know. So it's, you know, like when we look about comfortable living, and storage is a big thing as well when you're designing rooms. It's all about making sure that the person that's going to use the space is going to use it how you would want to use it. You know, that's how I always approach it. And yeah, things like drying rooms and, you know, larger spaces for kitchens and prep and everything like that, it makes all the difference. The goal is to make sure this is rented all the time.
Well, I think that irons out the huge long wait we've had and the obstacles we've had to overcome. And you've explained it so much better than we could ever have explained it, because this is your everyday. This is the sort of stuff you have to deal with on the regular.
Yeah. And this is just the beginning, right? All of this, and we've only just started.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you know, the biggest hurdle is planning. And actually that's your biggest value gain as well through planning, because that's the biggest hurdle you've actually got to get over in any way. But going back to timescale, you know, we had the original, or you get quoted the original timescale of 8 weeks. Coming out of the pandemic, a lot of the councils as well, and people need to bear this in mind, is that during that period, a lot of people working from home, and therefore decisions weren't being made, people weren't in the office. So that all adds to it. So where they lose staff and people are at home, and you see it up and down the country at councils at the moment, they're under so much pressure. And when they're under pressure, they can't get their decisions out in time. So yeah, that adds to the timescale as well as the project itself.
Thanks so much, Carl. It's been absolutely great chatting this through, and hopefully for our viewers that clears up a little bit of the uncertainty and the delay and the silence from our end about this project. So thanks so much.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for watching that. We really hope that helps iron out a few of the delays that we had. We were getting a lot of questions from you guys, but because we're not architects, it's really hard for us to sometimes sort of say exactly what the problem is and why things are taking so long. It's not our language. We let the professionals do it, don't
exactly,
we?
and exactly that point. And I think I said to you yesterday, I'd like to be able to share as many learnings as we have from all walks of the property journey, and you know, give as much value to you guys as well, so that you don't have to learn the hard way.
Definitely. And it's been a long waiting game. Like the waiting game has been so boring. Luckily there's been other stuff going on with our business and things happening on the side, so I guess one of the biggest learnings as well, which we didn't mention in the conversation with Colin, was that it was important for us to keep on top of other areas of our business whilst we were waiting for something like this, and it really dragged out for so many months. So thanks to AK, we really got our bookwork on top of each other, and our accounts and investor documents, and just things seem to be like we're on top of things now, which is a nice feeling.
Wow, yeah, it's good to know, isn't it?
You're like, did I do anything?
Yeah.
Thanks so much for watching this video, guys. If you are interested in speaking to Colin about one of your own projects, then all of his links are going to be below in our description box. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. And anything else?
Yeah, and we're also going to do another video with Colin where we answer all the frequent... we're going to answer all the frequently asked questions as well for planning and all that sort of lovely stuff. So yeah, see us in the next video. Link in the bio.
You'll see us in the next video where we do a video with Colin answering the frequently asked questions about property. planning permission.
See, it's not that easy,
That is
is
hard.
it? It's not that easy.
That is hard, you're right.
Brilliant.
See ya.
See ya.